funny that you bring that up, man. The guy that actually brought up the rice protocol actually came back and said, don't do this,
Don't
guys.
do it at all,
do it,
right. Feel when I start like zoning out from the video because my heart rate's just through the roof. And then I could push that limit by engaging that, like you said, like every once in a while going into zone 3 or 4, seeing how far I could push that limit, and then bringing it back to the mat, my jiu-jitsu exploded.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, let me go do no-gi, and then I'm like, oh, I got a lot of work to do now, like in terms of...
There's a saying in wrestling, right? The first period is won by the best technician, the second period is won by the best athlete, and the third period is won by the guy with the greatest heart, right? You can take heart as in, mental toughness, pain, but conditioning is not only just your physical capability, it's also your ability to, use your physical skills under stress, under that, so.
So I'm here with the grappling doc, Dr. Kenny Gu. Yeah. We're gonna talk about common injuries and ways to either prevent them or strengthen them and heal them post acquiring them.
Yeah.
So like grappling has a lot of like very consistent but difficult injuries to find real life, what do you want to say, like misinformation online?
Yeah.
Bad information, bad social.
Yeah. Misinformation or, kind of like the blind leading the blind, I guess you would say. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like for me, one of the most common injuries is like MCL, LCL injuries, especially ACL. Like ACL, once acquired surgery, you need to go to see a physical therapist and really get yourself back. Yeah. But even some common like MCL tweaks and just like general knee stuff, there's so much bad information and misinformation out there for people. So like, is there stuff that you do specifically for that?
Yeah.
Let's say?
So it's funny that you bring that up because I recently actually injured my MCL. I think it was about in December. I went for a single leg shot, and my partner at the time went for a sumigashi. I didn't really cut the angle properly, so so it pretty much like drove my knee all the way inward. Felt a pop, right after that. But especially really early on with injuries, your main priority should be to protect the injury site and just get on with your daily activities as best as you can. I think a lot of guys start thinking about like, how can I get back onto the mats? How can I start training judo or jiu-jitsu again? But no, don't worry about that. Like, worry about how you can walk from point A to point B. How can you just wake up in the morning and walk without pain, right? So one of my favorite things to do, man, right after injury, once someone can tolerate a little bit of load through the leg with like a straight leg raise or a squat is actually something called blood flow restriction. And we just talked about this a little bit earlier, but what blood flow restriction is, guys, it's a device or a tool that we use to constrict the blood flow into the leg and out of the leg, more so going out of the leg, so it kind of leaves a hypoxic environment inside the limb. And what it's been shown to do, like there's a bunch of different research going into there seeing like what it actually does, but some of the things they found that it does is that it stimulates hormone release, like you're lifting heavy weight when you're lifting no weight at all or just doing body weight. And it also activates more muscle fibers. So oftentimes, after an injury, you can't, let's say, tolerate like a full-on heavy squat on your back, but you can do blood flow restriction squats with just body weight, and you'll almost trick your body into thinking that you're lifting heavy weight, get the muscle activated, reduce pain, and just kickstart your rehab.
And does that increase blood flow and everything too? Like all like the repair kind of like
So the mechanisms are more so of just more muscle strengthening and activation, which is the key for actual after injury, right? When you get injured, there's decreased tissue length, decreased tissue strength, and oftentimes the body tries to protect itself, right? If you injure your shoulder, you kind of reflexively do this. In the short term, it's okay, but in the long term, you don't want to be walking around like that because so when you do blood flow restriction, you kind of almost calm your body down, be like, hey, we can actually load this body part, and then you'll notice like your walking's a lot better, you have less pain. It's pretty cool how it works, man. I've always seen like almost like a night and day difference, like when someone doesn't do it and then right after they do it.
So where is this in relation to like rice, like rest, ice, elevation?
It's funny that you bring that up, man. The guy that actually brought up the rice protocol actually came back and said, don't do this.
Don't do it at all, right?
It's the current moniker, I guess, I heard is like peace and love. But the main idea is to, first of all, is protect the injury site, but don't completely offload it. Because when you hear rest, people say don't do anything, right? But that's not what you want to do. Like if you just rest completely, you're going to get deconditioned, you're going to get weak, and when you get back on the mats, if you're weak and deconditioned, that's just a recipe for another injury right there, right?
Right.
So as our job as physical therapists, our goal is to see how we can protect the injury site, but also maintain your strength conditioning while this injury heals. That's what an ideal physical therapist should be doing, in my opinion, right? And that's what I try to do in my practice.
And so this blood flow restriction, you mentioned it for the knee. Is it also for like the shoulder, elbow, like pretty much anything you can kind of like wrap around? Right?
Yeah. So generally, the two sites that they put it on are on the thigh and on the upper arm. From my personal experience, I mainly especially for guys that do grappling, I mainly use it for the knee, but I have done it for my guys with elbow pain, some shoulder pain for the arms, especially sometimes guys can't tolerate like posting or framing, right? This way, and they want to load their shoulders up, they can grab a band and just put the cup on and just do like a set of 30 and 3 sets of 15, and it'll blow your shoulders apart just doing that.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool.
For me, like when I went to like a real established gym with cable machines, I started doing those like minor physical movements, and it completely changed my stability. Like even just stuff I was never doing before. And from a judo perspective, like you're always kind of like rounded on the back, and your shoulders in this like stressed position. It's not really like ergonomical until like later when you realize like, oh, I can't do the action like this. So you kind of relax, but you're so defensive for so many years. You develop this habit, and like just strengthening that was like prehab, because I definitely found myself in situations where I would throw my body, leave my shoulder behind, and a spot where I would feel it now, it's like, all right, I'm defended against it.
Yeah, and that's actually, that's great that you bring that up, man. Like I kind of call it, the term for this in like the PT world is called upper cross syndrome. Right now, it's kind of debated if that's really a real thing, but PT school, they kind of teach us that upper cross syndrome is, forward neck posture, shoulders are hunched over like this, the classic posture you see guys that sit on a desk. Yeah. It's also how we adopt posture in grappling, right? Like, you look at these guys right here, no one's grappling standing up like this, right? They're all hunched over like this to protect themselves, balled up.
Yeah.
And as a result, man, you get a lot of adaptation, because if you do this 5 days a week and then you work a desk job, right? Your pec minor is going to get shortened, your shoulder upper trap's going to get tight, left scap's going to get tight. Your rhomboids and middle strap's gonna get stretched. So for all my guys that grapple, and if they're not dealing with shoulder injuries or neck pain, I always think it's great to do some stuff like thoracic mobility, some banded shoulder external rotation, some scapular retraction, just so that you can get this back, right? You don't want to be always here,
No, absolutely not. I mean, this is the default defensive position. And then for me too, with judo, like you learn all your moves in one direction, so you get this like horrible asymmetry where like my right arm and my left arm definitely can't hold the same amount of weight, and then my rotation is so dominant in one way, and then it's like, if so, like, I know for me, so a couple months ago, somebody I do all my, I take thousands of break falls all the time. It was a lefty, and he's like, hey, I want to practice lefty on lefty. So now all of a sudden, and it was an Osoto, so he was going this way, and I had to kind of like twist the other way. I was messed up for a week.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Just because I was so infrequently taking that kind of a fall at that, and he was like another black belt, and he was a competitor. Yeah. So he just kind of loaded me up, put me through the mat.
You.
Yeah, and I was like, I'm not the best guy at break falls, but I'm serviceable. But I didn't think I'd get messed up that bad. But trying to do things in other directions, having even supplemental workouts at the gym to kind of like just balance the scales.
Yeah, and that brings up another great point, right? A lot of grapplers, especially in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world, I would say, like a lot of them, their only form of physical activity is doing stuff on the mat, right? And I get it, right? This is like probably like one of the best workouts you can do, strength and conditioning, right? You feel like you're getting a pump in, but understand that it's a repetitive activity, right? Yes. Athletes in other sports, if they play their sport 3+ times a week, they have to do some sort of strength conditioning on the side to, like you said, clear up the asymmetries, or strengthen the joints that are going to be under heavy load. Because if you only do an activity over and over and over again, it's just going to break you down, right? Yeah. It's only going to break you down. You got to program in some strength conditioning, some recovery, some light aerobic activity, maybe get your conditioning back up.
So for me, I don't know, this might be a controversial statement. So judo and wrestling kind of lead to more like traditional athleticism in terms of body type, where jiu-jitsu for me favors like lanky guys who have really interesting mobility abilities. Yeah. And it's like being able to really tuck your heel to your butt and like turn and pummel your knee to like scoop and stuff. Hypermobility. Yeah. And it's like the same, like if you just did judo and no other stuff and you didn't get hurt, you would kind of look at this person and be like, all right, this guy's like a monster. And so a lot of the best jiu-jitsu guys have that look, but then you also get like the really lanky dude who's not as visibly shocking as an athlete that is the top of the sport. Yeah. So it's like to supplement the jiu-jitsu, I feel, with like conventional weightlifting and like other stuff is like a great benefit from my perspective, from what I see.
For sure. I think also it comes down to the demands of the sport, right? Wrestling and judo, more explosive, right? Because you can win, especially in judo, right? You can win with the ippon, right? So if you can forcefully explode something, and you can argue, right? Because you can hit an ippon and not pin the guy. You just have to slam the guy on the ground. So you can just do a great one explosive movement. With wrestling, right? Especially in freestyle styles where you can get 5 points for just bombing someone over their head, right? So it rewards explosion a lot more compared than you could argue, jiu-jitsu or even folk style wrestling where you have to control the guy, grind the guy a little bit more. So in the terms of strength conditioning for judo and wrestling, I'd argue having explosive endurance, right, or being highly explosive is a little bit more beneficial, and obviously it always helps being explosive and having explosive endurance. But in jiu-jitsu, I'd argue it's probably more having just general aerobic capacity, endurance, isometric grip strength.
I 100% agree because I don't know. What the levels of endurance, like zone 2, zone 3? What are they? I forget.
Yeah. There's a couple of different resources that kind of are there's zone 2, zone 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can argue if there really is a 5. Generally, the most famous one, or popular one, is called zone 2, right?
Right.
And for most people, that's roughly around 60 to 70% of your max heart rate. Before they called it zone 2, they called it long steady distance or long slow distance cardiac output. And the idea is that you do this kind of training for a long period of time, and what it helps is that it helps eccentrically overload the left ventricle of your heart. So what it does is that it stretches the heart out a little bit so that it can pump more blood and hold more blood, right? So it makes your heart more efficient.
I see.
Once you get into zone 3, zone 3 is kind of more working on your threshold, your ability to sustain cardiac power, kind of right where you teeter onto the anaerobic side of things. You ever you ever train with some guys that aren't as good as you, and you kind of just hold them at bay, but then you go with a guy who's really good, and that's the round that kind of puts you on the you're like, okay, I'm breathing hard, my muscles are fatigued. You hit your anaerobic threshold at that point, right? So that zone 3 is kind of playing that line, how far can I push myself into zone 3 and sustain it, but not go into that zone 4 where I'm gonna get gassed out, right?
Right.
Zone 4 and above is now you're gonna go into that anaerobic plus threshold, highly powerful movements, but you're gonna fatigue out, all right? So the idea is you wanna do majority of your training at zone 2 throughout the week, no matter what athlete you are, right? Because you wanna build that aerobic capacity. It's not very draining on your systems. You can recover pretty fast from it, and you wanna be sparing with the zone 4, 5. You don't want to do that every day, right? It takes a lot out of you, but you should be hitting that at least a couple of times throughout the week, whether it be jiu-jitsu or judo, wrestling, or if you're not doing it there, which I don't know if you're not, then what are you doing? Then do it off on your own strength conditioning. Zone 3 is kind of like an in-between. It's kind of tough because you don't really get the best. You don't get the benefits of being very sustainable at zone 2, and you're not really getting the benefits of getting your max heart at zone 4 plus. So for me, I kind of program zone 3 kind of closer towards competition because it takes time to do, and it also is pretty fatiguing. So you got to be smart with how you program it in terms of your strength conditioning.
Absolutely, I'm so appreciative of the breakdown.
Yeah.
Because my high school, and not really collegiate, but I was a very high level swimmer.
That's funny. I used to swim before I wrestled, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What was your event?
I was more of a sprinter, 100 free.
Same here.
Yeah, there you go, man.
Yeah, 100 free, 2 fly, 2 IM.
Oh my God, 2 fly.
I could get that. Definitely 1 to 200, and then every once in a while, I bust out a 50. In my junior year, I bumped up to this collegiate, D1 adjacent level program. And I was instead of doing 100 intervals, I was starting to do 200 to 400 meter intervals.
Yeah.
And existing, it should have been zone 2. I was existing in zone 3 the whole time and just burning out.
Yeah, crushed you.
For months, I was just eating it. And then all of a sudden, I could get through the warm up in a zone 2. And then I could sniff the main set and be like, I'm gonna push myself here. And then by the time I got to competitions, I'm like, there's no way. Like anyone on the high school level that wasn't doing this D1 club stuff, I was like, you can't even hang with me. There's no way you put in the work. And then I see it here so much in all the disciplines where it's jiu-jitsu is definitely how long can you stay in zone 2? Could you remember the movements? Can you be comprehensive about it? Can you solve these puzzles? And can you force your puzzles onto someone else?
Yeah.
And then now all of a sudden, if they're getting gassed out and then can't think, they're 2, 3 steps behind, and then you can run to the submission. Where judo, I feel, is so zone 3 to 4.
Yeah.
Where you're kind of holding them at bay until you find one moment, and you better be there for it. Yeah. So it's such a, like, the cardio is such an essential part and so overlooked in these sports because people get so discouraged that like, oh, I'm not good, I need more technical practice. It's like, no, the gas tank, especially if you haven't pushed your body in a safe way into these zones, to all of a sudden be under threat of getting yourself like a concussion, you're not gonna be paying attention to the cardio, you're gonna be paying attention to the technique. So then, you know, these guys reach like a green belt level, and which would be like a high blue, purple in jiu-jitsu, and they get even more discouraged because now they're like in more rounds, and then the gas tank, like we never worked on gas tank previously, and then people see them and they go, all right, I'm gonna open up technical wise with the gas tank, and it's like overcoming that mentally is so big, but then this conversation of like where the zones are is like never had, and what they should feel in training. So it's like, it baffles me. So then when I was doing like the Peloton stuff, I was like, oh, here I am purely focusing on endurance safely. And I could feel my body in zone 2. I could feel when I start like zoning out from the video because my heart rate's just through the roof. And then I could push that limit by engaging that, and like you said, like every once in a while going into zone 3 or 4, seeing how far I could push that limit. And then bringing it back to the mat, my jiu-jitsu exploded. And then I was like, oh, let me go do no-gi. And then I'm like, oh, I got a lot of work to do now, like in terms of gas.
It's a little different, man. The wrestling no-gi style conditioning is a little bit different.
It's wild,
But yeah, excuse me. You know, they talk about this in grappling, right? Conditioning is your biggest hold. You know, you can have the greatest technique, but it doesn't matter, you know, in the final minutes or the third period, as we say in wrestling, right? There's a saying in wrestling, right? The first period is won by the best technician, the second period is won by the best athlete, and the third period is won by the guy with the greatest heart, right? You can take heart as in, you know, mental toughness, pain, but conditioning is not only just your physical capability, it's also your ability to, you know, use your physical skills under stress, under that. So as my guys get closer to competition, I think it's really important that your conditioning should start to be a little bit more grappling specific. So what that could look like, man, is you know, maybe you do like explosive uchikomis for judo guys, right? You know, for like intervals, you know, 10 seconds on as fast as you can, as powerful as you can, and then maybe do like 60 seconds, you know, active recovery. But you want to start to kind of get that to, you know, sport specific stuff, maybe having mock matches, I mean, situations, you know, but yeah, you know, I think a lot of grapplers, you know, they see, you know, the assault bikes and all that stuff. That's great for off season or, you know, pre-season stuff. But as you get closer to season, you know, your conditioning should start to be more grappling specific, which is great, you know, because I know they do competition rounds, they do competition class, and you should be getting that there.
I 100% agree, because like one of the biggest differentiators in the sport of judo, let's say, is there's not that many practitioners nationwide in the sport, and then any drip of minutes of being gripped up in a judo sense puts you light years ahead of anyone else in doing it. So like this amount of like I was always encouraging guys at our gym, just stand there and just grip up. Just feel it, play around, zero threat. Just to get these muscle movements. And I think exactly what you're saying, like, oh, when I get tired, I do this with my hands. That's a good application to like to be in the sport. You be gripped up. And then, that's it, like, I think like what happens a lot, and especially like you always lean on the higher belts, right? Like the teacher can dictate and teach, but you're really learning about when someone grabs you. So luckily I had a lot of good student teachers, senpais, who would like do low-level randori and like set me up for big throws without like yes, we were in it. Like if I really wasn't doing something right, they'd counter me, but it would be like staying in that zone too, being conscious of
conscious. That's the biggest thing. Conscious.
Like, and that was the only way I could grow, because I know like historically judo, you know, there's just like 10 guys in the gym. They're just monsters. You come in, you better be able to take break falls day one, and if you didn't handle it, you wash out. You know, survival of the fittest. I made it. You should make it. It's like crazy survivorship bias, and it's like. Like that conscious teaching. Luckily I've had Isa she was one of those people who taught me as a fellow student and a teacher. And then, you know, my teacher's here, but I kind of get the sense doing a lot of stuff online, it doesn't exist in a broader sense. So it's like, okay, like taking it under, you know, being conscious of it yourself and making sure you kind of communicate, say, hey, I'd like to go a little bit lighter. Let's work on this. And, you know, it's kind of difficult too, because let's say you have like an hour practice, hour and a half, and the teacher's teaching, and you know, this is what we're doing. How do you like, how maybe you're a yellow belt. You know, how do you say, I'd like to tone this down? You know, you're just like, I'm just going to survive. I'm going to do whatever I'm told. So it really comes from like a top-down thing.
Yeah. I think again, you know, it really is culture. You know, we're very fortunate that at this gym, I would say the dojo, you know, our instructors are all about, you know, safety first.
Yeah.
And just being conscious about your training, right? You know, I'm sure we all know about this. You can go to the gym and you can just do all pure rounds, but if you don't really like, you know, drill or come in with a game plan of what you really want to work on, right? Or did you really get that much better, or did you just come in and get a sweat in, right? Yeah, there's times that maybe that's what you want to do, right? Maybe you want to just go to the gym, you know, do that zone 4, 3, 4 training, right? The technique is already done. I'm just coming to it's the last couple weeks of, you know, before competition. I just want to get in here, get my heart rate up, you know, go high intensity just to stimulate the body and then just chill out. But again, you know, most of the time you should be coming here, you know, doing active training, you know, being an active participant and all that.
Gotcha. And so you've been training with a lot of, you started like a little program with active competitors, right? Did you get, I saw you were on Instagram soliciting for people to sign up for like a grappling athlete specific kind of like program for a couple months. How can you tell me about that? How was that?
So, are you referring to like my coaching, or like which program are you specifically?
I think it was like just an Instagram post where you were saying like, hey, I'm looking for like 3 to 4 competitors that you know, I want to take maybe for like 6 months and really do like a case study.
Yeah.
Did that happen? I don't know any.
Yeah. So I do make these like posts like pretty, I would say maybe like once every couple weeks or so, just kind of, you know, just to you know, tell people that like I'm looking for people to work with, and you know, I get people reaching out to me. You know, a lot of them are competitors. You know, a lot of them are, you know, training for some stuff like, you know, ADCC Opens, you know, IBJJFs, but a lot of them are also just guys like, you know, regular guys that just want to train with their kids, you know, or even their grandkids, right? And they're dealing with nagging injuries, or they want to build their strength conditioning up because before they started jiu-jitsu, they had a background maybe just doing bodybuilding kind of style lifts, but they realized that you can't lift 5 days in a week and train judo or jiu-jitsu 4 days, you know, 5 days a week. It's really, really hard. So, you know, my program, I don't view it as a pure strength conditioning program. I try to teach my guys strength conditioning principles, as well as recovery, as well as injury management. Because let's be real, we're all dealing with some kind of nagging injury, right? So we're all dealing with some kind of nagging injury. So my goal is to kind of teach them, you know, how do you just train for your sport and longevity. You know, that's really all it is. Yeah.
Awesome.
And it's going really well. You know, I started doing this about full time in July of 2022, I believe, or 2021 or 2022, and then I've been doing it since. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. All right, do you want to show the
blood flow restriction?
The blood flow restriction?
Yeah, let's get after it.
Let me check it to make sure.